let them come to you.
Their faces, the drawings they made.
It happened so fast.
There was nothing I could do to stop it.
I am here to speak for the 212 souls murdered in this canyon.
The land remembers what you forget, she warned, and the cowboy knelt in the ashes, New Mexico Territory, winter 1878. The first thing Silas Mercer saw when he rode into the canyon was the skeleton of a church. Its wooden bones reached toward a sky the color of old bruises, and the wind whistled through its empty ribs like a hymn no one remembered how to sing. Snow dusted the blackened timbers, collecting in the hollows where pews had once stood, where families had once gathered to pray. 6 years had passed since he helped burn this place, but the smell of smoke still lived in his nightmares, sharp and acrid, mixed with something sweeter, something he refused to name. He had been 28 when he helped burn this place. Young enough to follow orders without question, old enough to know better. Now he was 34, and every mile between then and now felt like a year. The whiskey had aged him faster, the bottles in nameless saloons, the fights he started hoping someone would finish him, the mornings he woke, not knowing where he was or how he'd gotten there. Comment 1, if you believe in second chances. His horse, a gray mare named Dust, picked her way through the frozen creek bed. She was the only living thing that had stayed with him through the years of wandering through desert heat and mountain cold, through towns that didn't want him and roads that led nowhere. She knew his moods better than any person. When he drank too much, she would nudge him with her nose until he stood. When nightmares woke him screaming, she would stand close, her breath warm against his face. The canyon walls rose on either side, red rock striped with white, ancient as the bones beneath the earth. Petroglyphs marked the stone, in places figures of deer and hunters and symbols he could not read. The Navajo called this place the Rock Canyon. They had lived here for generations, beyond counting, tending sheep and growing corn in the fertile valley floor. The army had called it something else. A target. A problem to be solved. Silas pulled his coat tighter. He had not come here to remember. He had come here to die or to find something worth living for. He was not particular about which. The cabin appeared like a ghost, small, sturdy, built from the red earth itself. Adobe walls, the color of sunset, a roof of weathered timber, and earth that seemed to grow from the canyon floor. Smoke rose from a hole in the roof, thin and blue in the cold air. Someone lived here. Someone had rebuilt in the shadow of everything that had been destroyed. Silas felt something twist in his chest. He had expected the canyon to be empty, a graveyard, a monument to shame. Finding life here felt like an accusation. He dismounted. His boots crunched on frozen ground, each step loud in the winter silence. Dust stamped and snorted, sensing his unease. The canyon walls seemed to lean in, watching, waiting. And then he saw her. She stood in the doorway with a rifle aimed at his chest. Her hair was black as river stones, braided and wrapped with red cloth in the traditional way. Her face was the color of clay after rain, smooth, warm, unreadable. She wore a wool blanket over her shoulders, dyed in patterns of red and black, and her eyes held the steady patience of someone who had learned to wait for everything. There was no fear in those eyes, only a terrible, quiet knowing. Silas had seen that look before, in the faces of soldiers who had lost too many friends, in the mirrors of saloons staring back at his own reflection. It was the look of someone who had already survived the worst and was simply waiting to see what came next. "You are not welcome here," she said. Her English was careful, accented with the rhythm of her own language, each word placed deliberately like stones in a path. Silas raised his hands slowly, showing them empty. "I know." "Then why did you come?" Her finger remained steady on the trigger. She had handled rifles before. She knew how to use them. He looked at the burned church behind him, at the snow falling on graves. No one had marked mounds in the earth that he now recognized for what they were. because I helped make this place what it is. And I do not know how to unmake it. I have tried forgetting. I have tried drinking. I have tried dying. His voice cracked on the last word. Nothing works. The woman studied him for a long moment. Her finger did not leave the trigger. The land remembers what you forget, she said finally. If you stay, you will remember too. That is what I am afraid of. She lowered the rifle. Not because she trusted him. Trust was a word that had lost its meaning the day the soldiers came. She lowered it because she had seen something in his eyes, that she recognized the hollow look of a person carrying the dead. She had worn that look herself for years, staring at her reflection in the creek water, wondering if she would ever feel whole again. My name is Nizhoni, she said. It means beautiful in my language. My mother gave it to me before the soldiers came. She said I would grow into it. A pause. I am still waiting. She stepped aside from the doorway, and the gesture felt larger than the movement, an opening, a decision, a risk she could not explain even to herself. You will sleep in the barn. You will work hard work, honest work. You will not drink. You will not carry weapons. And you will not speak of the past until you are ready to kneel in it. The barn was cold but dry. Silas laid his bedroll on a pile of hay and listened to the wind shake the walls. Through a crack in the wood, he could see Nizhoni's cabin, a small square of warm light in the darkness. Smoke rose from the chimney hole in thin spirals, and he could smell juniper burning. It was a smell that would come to mean home, though he did not know it yet. He did not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flames. He heard screams. He felt the heat on his face and the weight of the torch in his hand. At dawn, he rose and walked to the creek, breaking the thin ice with his boot to wash his face. The cold was a relief sharp enough to cut through memory. In the morning, she put him to work. The fence needed mending, posts had rotted through the winter and wire had come loose in the wind. The woodpile needed building. Winter was not done with the canyon yet. The sheep, a small flock of churro sheep with wool-like clouds, needed tending. They were skittish around him at first, sensing the stranger in their midst, but Nizhoni showed him how to move slowly, how to speak in low tones, how to let them come to him. She did not explain why she was teaching him. She simply pointed, and he obeyed. There was a strange comfort in the work, in the ache of muscles, the splinter of wood, the simple clarity of tasks that needed doing. For the first time in years, Silas's hands were building instead of destroying. For 3 days they did not speak beyond necessity. Water. Wood. There. She communicated in gestures and single words, and he learned to read the language of her silence. On the 4th day she handed him a bowl of mutton stew. He had not realized how hungry he was until the warmth hit his belly. You were cavalry, she said. It was not a question. Yes. You were here. 6 winters ago. He set down the bowl. His hands were shaking. Yes. Nizhoni sat across from him, her own bowl untouched. The fire crackled between them, throwing shadows on the earthen walls. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the first whispers of another storm. My mother died in the church, she said. She ran there with the other women, thinking it would be sanctuary. She was carrying my baby brother. He was only 3 months old. Her voice did not waver. She spoke as if reciting something she had recited many times, wearing the sharp edges smooth. My sister, too. She was 14. She liked to sing bird songs, mostly ones she made up. She could imitate any bird in the canyon. The wrens, the hawks, even the owls at night. She paused, her eyes fixed on the fire. My father tried to fight. He had no weapon but a shepherd's staff, a piece of juniper wood he had carved himself smooth from years of use. They shot him in the doorway of our home. He fell across the threshold, and I hid in a crevice in the rocks, a place where I used to play as a child. I watched everything. I could not look away. Silas felt his throat close. The weight of her words pressed down on him like stones. "I do not apologize," she cut him off. "Apologies are air. They change nothing." She picked up her bowl and ate. "If you want to give something, give work. Give time. Give silence when silence is needed." He understood then that she had not let him stay out of mercy. She had let him stay because she needed to look at him to see the face of what had taken everything and not flinch. Her healing was not forgiveness. It was something harder. It was witness. The weeks passed in rhythm each day, a small stone added to a growing cairn of routine. Silas learned the canyon's moods, the way the light changed at dawn, painting the red walls gold and amber, the way the wind spoke differently before snow carrying a sharper edge, the way the sheep knew where to find water even when the creek froze, pressing their noses to spots where springs ran warm. Beneath the ice, he learned the names of things, the tall yucca plants that Nizhoni called tzz, the juniper trees, Gad, that provided wood and berries and medicine, the red-tailed hawks that circled overhead, patient as prayers. He learned Nizhoni's rhythms, too. She rose before the sun to grind corn on a stone metate, the steady sound of grinding a kind of morning song. She wove blankets on a loom. Her grandmother had built patterns of red and black and white that told stories he could not read, stories of mountains and rivers, of journeys and homecomings. She sang while she worked, not words he understood, but melodies that made the air feel different, softer, older. He noticed that she never wove during certain phases of the moon, that she always faced east when she began her morning work, that she sprinkled cornmeal on the threshold of her door, each dawn, small gestures. He did not ask about rituals that belonged to her alone. One evening, she found him standing at the edge of the burned village. The snow had melted enough to show the foundations, the outlines of homes, the stone circles where cooking fires had been. In some places he could still see the black stain of char on the rocks. A broken pot lay half buried in the mud, its painted surface cracked but still showing a pattern of interlocking lines. There were 43 families, she said, coming to stand beside him. 212 people. I know all their names. How do you bear it? She knelt and pressed her palm to the frozen earth. The land holds them. When I touch the ground, I touch them. They are not gone. They are here. Silas watched her, this woman who had lost everything and still found a way to stay connected to what was lost. He had spent 6 years running from memory. She had spent 6 years building a home inside it. "Teach me," he said. She looked up at him. For the first time, something shifted in her eyes, a crack in the stone. "Kneel." He did. The frozen ground bit through his trousers. His knees ached. "Put your hands on the earth." He pressed his palms down. The cold was sharp, almost painful. "Now ask the land to remember you." "I do not know how." "Then stay until you learn." He stayed. The sun set. The stars came out, more stars than he had ever seen, scattered across the black sky like seeds thrown by a careless hand. The Milky Way stretched overhead, a river of light that the Navajo called the backbone of the sky. His hands went numb, then began to burn with returning warmth. His knees ached on the frozen ground, but he did not move. Somewhere in that long silence he felt something shift inside him, a door opening to a room he had kept locked for 6 years. Behind that door were the faces of people he had tried to forget. The old woman who had looked at him with confusion as her home burned. The young man who had tried to shield his family with his body. The child's doll in the ash, its cloth face melted into a permanent scream. He let himself see them, all of them. For the first time he did not look away. When he finally rose, his cheeks were wet. He had not realized he was crying. His legs were stiff and he stumbled. Nizhoni caught his arm the first time she had touched him and held him steady until he found his balance. Nizhoni stood beside him. She did not touch him, but her presence was warm. "The land remembers," she said. And now so do you. The blizzard came without warning. One moment the sky was gray, heavy with unshed snow. The next white fury swallowed the canyon. The wind screamed through the rocks like something alive driving ice needles that stung exposed skin. Silas barely made it from the barn to the cabin before the world disappeared. He stumbled through the door, covered in snow, his eyebrows frozen white. Inside, Nizhoni had already built the fire high. Orange light danced on the earthen walls, and the smell of burning juniper filled the small space. The sheep were secure in the barn. She had known the storm was coming, had read something in the wind that morning that Silas had missed. There was nothing to do but wait. They sat across from each other as the wind screamed outside, shaking the cabin walls. Snow hissed against the small window, piling in the corners. The fire popped and crackled, sending sparks up the chimney hole. In this small space, with the storm raging outside, the world contracted to just the two of them. Nizhoni made coffee strong and bitter the way he had come to prefer it. She handed him a cup without speaking, and they drank in silence for a long time. Then she pulled a wooden box from beneath her sleeping blankets. It was old, the wood worn smooth by years of handling, carved with a simple pattern of diamonds and lines. "I have not shown these to anyone," she said. She opened the box. Inside were small things: a strand of yarn deep red, a turquoise bead on a leather cord, a piece of paper with a child's drawing of sheep and mountains. "My mother spun this yarn," Nizhoni said, touching the red strand. "She could make any color from plants and roots. She said red was the color of the earth's heart." She lifted the turquoise bead. "This was my sister's. She wore it every day. When I found it in the ashes, I knew she was still with me." She unfolded the drawing. "My father made this for me when I was small. He could not read words, but he could draw anything." Silas's throat burned. He had no right to witness this, no right to share in her sacred things. "Why are you showing me?" he asked. "Because you need to see what was taken. Not just houses, not just lives, but this." She held up the yarn, the bead, the drawing. "Stories, songs, the way my mother laughed, the sound of my sister's voice. You cannot give these back, but you can know they existed." He wanted to run. He wanted to disappear into the blizzard and let the cold take him. But he stayed, because she had asked him to witness, and that was the least he could give. "Tell me," she said. "Tell me what you remember." And so he did. He told her about the orders, the colonel who said the canyon was harboring hostiles, though everyone knew it was farmers and shepherds. He told her about the cold morning they rode in, about the mist rising from the creek, about how peaceful everything looked before the shooting started. He told her about the screams, how they echoed off the canyon walls, multiplying until it sounded like the whole world was crying out. About the fire spreading faster than anyone expected, jumping from hogan to hogan, driving people out into the open where the soldiers waited. About the mother who ran toward the church with her children, thinking it would be sanctuary. He told her about the moment he found a child's doll in the ash, a corn-husk doll with a blue dress, its face burned away, and realized what they had done. What he had done. He had not pulled a trigger that day, but he had held the perimeter. He had watched. He had let it happen. "I deserted 3 days later," he said. His voice was hoarse, scraped raw by confession. "I took my horse and rode until I couldn't ride anymore. I have been running ever since. Drinking, fighting, looking for someone to kill me so I wouldn't have to do it myself. Running does not work," she said. "The dead follow. I know." She closed the box and set it aside. For a long moment they sat in silence, listening to the wind. "My mother used to say that fire destroys, but fire also cleans," Nizhoni said finally. "After a fire, the land grows back stronger. New plants push through the ash." She looked at him. "Maybe that is true for people too. Do you believe that I am trying to?" Spring came to the canyon in slow, patient strokes of green and gold. It didn't arrive all at once, but crept in through the nights, first in the way the frost loosened its grip on the stones, then in the softening of the wind, then in the sound of the creek which rose each morning, until it roared with the urgency of snowmelt rushing down from far-off peaks. In the narrow places the water foamed white, leaping against rock walls, as if delighted to be free again after months locked in ice. Cottonwoods along the riverbank unfurled their tender leaves pale as new coins. Wildflowers pushed through soil still cold from winter-purple asters curling like small galaxies, yellow desert marigolds, bright as captured sunlight, and the shy white blooms of yucca clustered in places where nothing should have dared grow. Even the lambs born trembling and uncertain weeks earlier now staggered on firmer legs, butting one another clumsily in the open meadow. Life returned to the canyon with a softness that made the winter feel impossibly far away. But one morning life paused. Riders appeared at the mouth of the canyon. 6 of them. Their silhouettes cut sharp against the climbing sun, and the sheep went still gathered in a protective cluster, as though they sensed what the horses carried. Dust rose behind the riders in a gold curtain. They did not hurry. Men who hurry are uncertain. These riders were not. At their head rode a man in a charcoal wool coat, fine enough to belong on a judge, not a trail. His hat was stiff, its felt untouched by sweat or weather. His horse gleamed like polished bronze, the kind of shine only money or servants could maintain. He sat his saddle like a man long accustomed to paths being cleared before him. His face was smooth cheeks, full jaw clean, too well cared for to belong to the frontier. Yet his eyes spoiled that illusion. They were narrow, assessing a predator's arithmetic flickering behind them. He counted everything he saw: the grass, the cabin, the creek, the woman who stepped outside her door. To him, the canyon was not a place, it was a ledger waiting to be filled. Miss Nizhoni he called, stopping at the boundary where her land met the open trail. His voice carried the practiced warmth of men who never expected refusal. "My name is Edmund Holloway. I represent the Santa Fe Land Company." The canyon seemed to shrink around the name as if it recognized something dangerous in it. Nizhoni stepped out of her cabin, back straight hair, braided tight. Silas followed and took his place a half-step behind her, not in front, never in front. His hand rested near his pistol but did not draw. The gesture was enough. "This land is not for sale," she said. Holloway smiled, a polished, empty expression. The smile of men who owned banks, rail lines, and the people who depended on both. "I understand your attachment." "Truly I do." His tone was gentle, falsely so. "This land has history." "Meaning?" He gestured broadly at the canyon walls rising like ancient red cathedrals around them. "But progress waits for no one, Miss Nizhoni. A railroad line is coming through this valley. There will be towns, commerce, civilization. This place could flourish. It could support a way station, a mining operation, a future." His voice tightened, shedding its honey. "Or it could be taken. These things happen on the frontier." "Taken," Nizhoni repeated softly, though her voice carried farther than Holloway's. "Like it was taken before." A twitch appeared at the corner of Holloway's mouth, a crack in the veneer. "That was unfortunate," he said. "But the past is the past. I'm offering you a future. The past is not past." Nizhoni stamped her foot once, the sound sharp as a drumbeat. "The past is here. My family is here. Their bones are here. I will not leave them." Holloway's gaze slid from her to Silas. Something cold brightened in his expression. "Silas Mercer," he said, savoring the name. "I know you. 3rd Cavalry. You were part of the canyon operation." He let out a short, ugly laugh. "And now you're here, playing house with one of the survivors." "That's poetic." Silas felt heat drain from his skin. Winter crept into his bones again, the old winter, the one made of guilt, not snow. He waited for Nizhoni to step away from him, to recoil, to turn her face as others had once done. But she didn't. "I know who he is," she said calmly. "I knew the first day." Holloway blinked. It wasn't often that something caught him unprepared. "You knew," he stammered. "And you let him stay. The land decides who belongs," she said. "Not me. Not you." Something shifted behind Holloway's eyes, confusion swallowed by calculation, as though he were rearranging his plans in real time. "Well," he said, drawing himself taller in the saddle, "this is certainly an interesting arrangement. A wanted deserter protecting stolen land. The authorities might be very interested in that." "The land is not stolen," Nizhoni said. "We were here before your laws, before your borders, before your God." Holloway's face hardened. The smile vanished. "You have 1 week. Sign the papers, or I will return with men who are less diplomatic." He turned his horse sharply and rode out of the canyon, his men following in a neat column. Dust rose behind them like the tail of a storm. Silas watched until the last rider disappeared. Only then did he feel his breath return. "You should have told him I forced you," he whispered. "You could have turned me in, protected yourself." Nizhoni studied him, really studied him, as if weighing the lines on his face, the shadows in his eyes, the choices he had already made without admitting them. "The truth does not change because it is convenient," she said. "You came here to die or to live." She stepped closer, close enough that he felt the warmth of her breath. "Now you must choose." Holloway returned in 5 days, not 7. He came with 12 men, this time hard-eyed riders, with rifles slung loose across their saddles, and the sort of easy cruelty worn by men who had never once been asked to answer for anything they'd done. Some bore the look of hired guns, stiff coats, polished boots, and the restless twitch of men paid to enact violence. Others looked hungrier drifters. Holloway had scraped from saloons and freight camps, men whose ribs showed through their shirts and whose desperation made them dangerous. They fanned out along the ridge above the canyon as the sun climbed, cutting off the only simple way out. Dust rose behind their horses like smoke lifting from dead grass. The canyon, usually alive with morning bird call, held its breath. Even the wind seemed to hesitate at the edge of the stone walls, unsure if it should enter a place about to be stained again with blood. Silas stood in front of the cabin, boots planted in the sand. Nizhoni stood beside him, still as carved basalt. Neither carried a weapon. That choice had not come easily. They had spent most of the night talking in low, tired voices, weighing paths that all pointed to violence. In the end, Nizhoni's words had cut through the dark like a blade. "If we fight with guns," she had said, "we become what they expect. We become the savages they tell stories about to frighten themselves. I will not die fulfilling their stories." Silas had looked at her, then really looked, and had found no fear in her eyes, only certainty. A kind of ancestral steadiness. He could not remember the last time he had stood beside someone so unshaken. Now Holloway raised his hand, signaling the men to halt. Leather creaked. Horses snorted. The canyon watched. "Last chance," Holloway barked, voice rolling off the stone. "Sign the deed, or we burn what's left." "You know I keep my word." Silas stepped forward. His hand stayed raised, though his pulse hammered hard against his ribs as if begging to escape. He forced breath into his lungs until the air steadied. "Do these men," Silas called out, "know what happened here?" A ripple went through the riders. A few exchanged glances. One spat into the dust. "Do they know about the 43 families, the 212 people?" Silas lifted his arm and pointed toward the distant ruins of the church, gray stone ribcage of a building long dead. "Do they know what the army did at that church when women and children were burned alive, when old men were shot while kneeling to pray?" The words hung heavy. The canyon absorbed them, unwilling to give them back. Some of Holloway's men shifted uneasily in their saddles. A young man with freckles and a shock of red hair went pale, not the pallor of sickness, but of recognition, as though he had heard rumors of such things, and never expected to meet someone who could swear to their truth. Another man, older and weather-worn, stared at the horizon, as though it offered escape. Silas kept going, voice low but carrying. "I was there," he said. "I wore the uniform. I followed the orders. I told myself I was doing my job, just following command." He shook his head once sharp. "But the screams don't follow orders. They stayed. 6 years of trying to outrun the smell of smoke. 6 years of waking up with my hands shaking because I remember who I used to be." He stepped forward again. The ground under his boots felt warm, as if the memories themselves burned. "This man," Silas nodded at Holloway, "wants to finish what the army started. He wants to take the last land these people have left. He wants to put rails through their graves, through their bones, through the stories their children still carry. And he wants you to do it for him. To be his hands, his guns, his fire." Holloway's face darkened. His jaw clenched tight enough to strain the tendons in his neck. "Enough," Holloway snapped. "I said burn it," but none of the men moved. The young cowboy with the sunburned face swallowed hard, then slowly holstered his pistol. "I didn't sign up to burn out a woman," he muttered, voice cracking. "My mama would rise from the grave and skin me alive. This ain't right." Silence. Then the older man with the gray in his beard nodded slowly, gravely. "Boy's right," he said. "I've done bad things. Driven cattle where they shouldn't go. Drunk myself mean some nights. But this," he shook his head, tugged lightly at his reins, and turned his horse. "This I won't do. You're alone in this, Holloway." One by one, hesitant, ashamed, or simply tired men began turning away. Hooves clattered down the ridge. Dust rose, curled, and drifted apart like something finally released. A few riders looked back, eyes shadowed with something like guilt. Others kept their faces rigidly forward, unwilling to witness the consequences of their departure. In the end, only 3 men remained: Holloway and 2 riders whose eyes were flat, lifeless, as though nothing in the canyon, no story, no truth, could touch them. "You think this changes anything?" Holloway snarled. "I have lawyers. I have the law. I don't need their guns." Nizhoni stepped forward into the full light of morning. In her hand she carried a small leather pouch, beaded with a simple pattern, no ornament, only meaning. She opened it and let a handful of seeds fall into her palm. Tiny black, glinting faintly like bits of night sky. "My grandmother planted these," she said quietly, "and her grandmother before her, and the one before that. They are chill itch plants, born from fire. They sleep until flames wake them. They rise only when the land burns." She knelt, pressing her knees to the dirt. Her shadow stretched long in the morning light. She scattered the seeds in a wide arc. They fell soft as dark rain, nestling into crevices, disappearing beneath the thin crust of earth, as though returning to something that had always been theirs. "You can burn this cabin," she said. "You can burn me. You can burn every seed I drop. Bring your railroads and your towns. Bring your laws that bend like grass toward whoever has the most coin." She laid her palm on the earth, an old gesture older than the language Holloway spoke. "But this land remembers. And long after your railroads rust, long after your name blows away like sand, children of my people will walk this canyon. And they will know they belong to it." Holloway stared at her. Something flickered in his eyes, a thin crack in stone, a splinter of fear or doubt or realization that some victories could not be bought. Then he jerked his reins, spurring his horse into a tight circle. "This isn't over," he spat. But even as he rode away, the canyon said otherwise. The wind moved again, slow and certain, as if exhaling after a long-held breath. And everyone, Silas, Nizhoni, even the 2 silent riders who followed Holloway, knew the truth: it was over. The land had decided so. Summer came golden to the canyon, painting the red walls with light that seemed to come from inside the stone itself. The seeds Nizhoni had planted pushed through the earth, tiny green shoots, reaching for the sun, fragile and determined. The sheep grew thick with wool, ready for autumn shearing. The creek ran clear and cold, its voice a constant murmur beneath the calls of canyon wrens. Word had spread about Holloway's failed claim. A newspaper in Santa Fe had written about the confrontation, a small story buried on a back page, but enough. Other land speculators thought twice before riding into the canyon. The law, such as it was, looked the other way. And Holloway himself had retreated to his offices, nursing wounded pride and calculating his next move, though that move would never come. Some battles once lost stay lost. Silas finished the last fence post and stepped back to survey his work. It was good work. Solid. The kind of work that would last through winters and summers, that would stand against wind and time. His hands, once soft from years of saloon living, were calloused now, strong from honest labor. Nizhoni came to stand beside him. In the months since Holloway's departure, something had shifted between them, not suddenly but slowly, like dawn spreading across the canyon walls. They did not speak of it. They did not need to. "I dreamed of my mother last night," she said. She was weaving. She looked up at me and smiled. "What do you think it means?" "I think she is at peace." She paused. "I think I am too." Silas turned to look at her, this woman who had taught him how to kneel, how to remember, how to stay. The evening light caught her face, turning her skin to copper and gold. "I should have died here," he said. 6 years ago I should have been one of the bodies in the ash. But you weren't." "No. And I don't know why." Nizhoni reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were calloused from work, warm from the sun. "Maybe you lived so you could come back," she said. "Maybe you lived so you could learn. Maybe the land needed a witness." She squeezed his hand. "Or maybe there is no reason. Maybe we just are." "Can I stay?" The words came out before he could stop them, raw, vulnerable, the question he had been afraid to ask. She did not answer with words. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small pouch, the same pouch that held the seeds. From it, she took a turquoise bead on a leather cord. "This was my sister's," she said. "I have carried it for 6 years. I told myself I was keeping it safe for her." She pressed it into his palm. "But she does not need it anymore. And I think it is time to let it find a new home." Silas looked at the bead, small and blue as a piece of sky. He understood what she was giving him. Not forgiveness, that was too simple, too clean. She was giving him belonging, a place in the story, a thread in the weave. "I will try to be worthy of it," he said. "I know." They stood together as the sun set, painting the canyon walls in shades of fire and gold. The light caught the red rock and turned it to copper, then to rust, then to deep purple, as the shadows crept up from the valley floor. Somewhere below, the sheep called to each other, settling in for the night. The wind carried the scent of sage and coming rain, and somewhere a nighthawk called its evening song. And in the distance, where the burned church had once stood, a grove of young trees was beginning to grow, cottonwoods and willows, their roots reaching deep into soil that had known so much fire. Green life rising from old ash, as it always did, as it always would. That night, Silas did not sleep in the barn. He sat by the fire in Nizhoni's cabin, listening to her sing an old song she said that her mother had sung to her and her mother's mother before that. A song about journeys and homecomings, about loss, and the things that survive loss. He did not understand the words, but he understood the feeling, grief and hope braided together like her hair, inseparable, eternal. In the morning they would begin building a second room onto the cabin. They would plant a garden, corn and squash and beans, the 3 sisters that had fed her people for generations. They would teach the sheep new paths to summer grazing grounds. The work would be hard, the way all good work is hard. but they would do it together, two people who had found each other in the aftermath of fire. The land remembers. The land forgives.